I'm excited to share Bill as an exclusive sponsor of the Thrivecast. They have been sponsoring the Thrivecast for so long. Thank you, Bill. Our firm has been using Bill for over a decade now. We actually use it in all of our foundational CFO and controllership engagements. We have to turn all of our clients' financial processes digital, and we do that with Bill. And you can check out some webinars and blogs and even toolkits that I build with Bill to help in your firm. So thank you, Bill, for being a sponsor of the Thrivecast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thrivecast. We're so pumped to have you. We have great guests that come teach us so much about firms, technology. Got a great guest today. He ran an accounting firm out of Oregon. You know who it is? Runs Realize, a community for accounting firm owners. Do you know who it is? So Jason Staats is going to be with us today. Very excited, and began producing video content out of his garage. All of the video content we see started in his humble garage, which is cool. Now runs YouTube channel, daily podcast, has done cool videos, LinkedIn, for Zapier, and all kind of accounting-related publications. So we're excited to have Jason Staats on the show. So thank you, Jason, for joining us. How are you doing, man?
Thank you, Jason. I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to this.
Nice. Well, cool. Well, thank you for coming on the Thrivecast. We're going to try to figure out all things tech, but we want to dive into your background a little bit. So why technology? I guess you've always been interested in technology, I would imagine. Is that kind of how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, somewhat. To me, accounting these days, like, it just is technology. Like we get so many things thrown at us. The two are very much inseparable. And I think there's probably always been a version of the dialogue that accounting's going away. But when I came of age, it was like robotic process automation in the cloud. Like, there were all these things that were going to end the profession. And so I'm like, well, shoot, I'm going to learn how to do all these things then, so that ultimately I'm safe. And it kind of just, honestly, it came from a place of, like, I don't know, self-preservation. And so that's kind of always why I've had that interest.
Okay. Now, in your firm, did you do all the technology? Like, you were the guy there? Imagine you were.
I don't know. In the early days, yes. Later on, it wasn't me. I mean, we had a full-time IT person and all that, but I was definitely the automation nerd who was kind of challenging the process and saying, how can we do this stuff better?
Okay. Well, okay. So a little bit about that firm. Was that more of a traditional firm? You had servers, things like that, or all cloud virtual? How were y'all set up? So we're going to rat you out.
When I came to this firm, so I bought out several partners, and ultimately it was me and another guy. It was an 80-year-old tax firm, and everything that you would expect to be associated with an 80-year-old tax firm. So the people, the client base, the system. So yeah, when I first got there, it was all on-prem. We had a server, and ultimately I cut my teeth for about a decade doing tax prep, and then wanted to launch a CAS practice within that firm. And that was a very progressive. It was remote first. We had people around the world, and that's sort of started the firm on a transition to what the more modern approach is. So I like to think I've gotten to experience that entire spectrum, because it absolutely was everything that you would expect a legacy firm to be.
Yeah. Okay. So no, that's true. You stepped into this majorly traditional firm, implemented some automation, then cloud and all that. So you kind of went through that, and that's tough. Not everybody embraces that initially, I guess. Was that the case with your client base, your team, partners?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's 2,000 clients and 40 people, and that's a lot of inertia. And there will people who have these conversations online who are like, "What do you mean modern this, modern that? Why is this hard?" Who started their firm 3 days ago, and 3 years ago, and they don't know anything different. And the challenges of someone who has a successful business today to get that from A to B is a very different challenge than going out and starting a new firm tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, and so that's a good point. So what a lot of people are, so if people are hearing you and listening to you a lot, they got to cut themselves a break, right? If they've been running a firm that has a lot of inertia, client bases they have their own style. You train them, they get used to things. So if you try to implement a lot of this in an older firm, it's just going to be more of a difficult change management function, right? And so it's just going to take longer, I guess, than people that start virtually.
And some change is worth doing, and some change is fundamentally at odds with the type of client that you're trying to serve. So ultimately, the very best firm knows exactly what their client needs. And so I love the firm that, for example, is helping retirees and going to the retirement home and doing that tax stuff in person and like meeting them where they are, and like there's like definitely some trends and ways that we ought to modernize, but very few absolutes also. Um, so I what gets me most excited is seeing the execution of that is like hyper relevant to the type of person you're trying to serve.
Yeah. Okay. That matters, right? So the kind of client you're trying to serve is how you need to adapt your technology to serve them well. So just know what you want and what kind of firm you're building, I guess, right, before you make your technology changes.
Yeah, and the filter all that goes through that you have to be aware of is my own willingness to change. Like if I'm not willing to learn QuickBooks Online, if I'm not willing to learn why managing client requests, like automated client requests through a portal, like why that could be beneficial. If I'm not willing to do that, ultimately, I don't know if that's going to be better for the people I serve or not. So you always got to be mindful of that filter. But yeah, ultimately, it's about crafting what's going to be the best for a specific type of person.
Very cool. So what kind of started shifting things for you? I mean, you were fully embedded in this firm and had been for a long time. And when did you make your first video? And the courage to go, I'm going to put this online and see if people hate me. Why did you do that?
It's a super meandering path. I mean, this was maybe 3 years ago now. It all started when I wanted to learn more about email marketing because that was super hot, and I was thinking this is probably something that could be helpful for my firm. So I started a little newsletter that was like tech discovery for accountants, and it started very innocently, and it was like, hey, here's 10 new things every week. And one week, I shot a little Loom video like 90 seconds about the most popular tool from the previous week. And I was just like, hey, here's what it does. And I put it at the top of the email. And 3 times as many people clicked on that video as clicked on anything else in the email. So this became a weekly thing. And let me tell you, these videos were shocking. They were not good. Like so bad. Oh yeah, I post them all the time because what I don't want people to do is see my stuff now and think, "Oh, I could never do that." Buddy, nobody was watching when those things were absolutely terrible. Like, it was exactly what you would expect a first timer, to do. And so that kind of built a weekly habit actually of doing that stuff every week. Eventually started putting them on YouTube, and that was, 3 years ago, and it's all kind of come from that.
Yeah, very cool. What did the pandemic have to do with any of that, if anything? Like, was the pandemic driving some changes in your life to kind of move away from the firm, or not? What did the pandemic do related to any of that, if anything?
Um, I wouldn't say it had a huge impact directly on my decision making. I will say, one thing it did for a lot of people, myself included, is it was kind of a mental reset of what are my priorities, why am I doing this. So in that regard, it probably was. Um, but there were definitely things like content creation and social media, and that whole industry definitely exploded during COVID. Um, But I would say if COVID had any impact on kind of my decision making there, it was just kind of reassessing what's important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned, I was thinking through my priorities and why I'm doing this. What is your why, or whatever you would say? What's driving you now? I guess some of us can guess what that is, but it would be good to hear from you. What's your purpose? That's a big
Yeah, I mean,
question, isn't it?
yeah, I got a 2, a 4, and a 6-year-old. I mean, that's top of the list. Being able to make time for all of that and being able to be super present. But ultimately in my work, what I found was, um, you know, there's been several kind of big steps in my journey around like what is the higher leverage way to help people. So I started as a junior, just like everybody else did, and then learned, through tech and through helping people within the firm, I could actually upskill, all the people we have in the firm, and then through elevating myself to be totally out of client work and work exclusively on the business. And that was a way to, help the people that we had even more. And then I started publishing videos on YouTube about firm running. And, you see 1,000 people watch that in 24 hours and you're like, okay, there's actually another higher leverage way for me to help people. So um, that's kind of been my guiding light is um, how do I be helpful? Like ultimately is what it's about. And I think these days with what the internet enables and that everybody honestly spends their free moments scrolling an algorithm. Like that just is the way things are now. Um, I've kind of backed into a business of being helpful, which is really exciting. But ultimately, for me, the highest leverage version of that was not, sitting and spending time with staff. It was putting that stuff out there where people could consume it.
Yeah. No, that's very cool. Is all of this a surprise? I mean, I would imagine you
Oh
didn't
yeah.
have some master plan to be an accounting influencer. Most of us
Oh
don't wake
no.
up going, I'm going to do that.
No, I mean, if my 13-year-old self could see me now, right? None of this, yeah, none of this was planned in any way. And you know what I think it is a great reminder of the fact that we are accountants. As accountants, we're very like ROI based creatures. We're always thinking about where's this going to take me? Why is this worth my time? And all of that. When the very best things that'll happen to you in your life uh, will almost certainly happen, not because you manifested that thing, like they just happen. Meeting your partner, like, the very best things when you look back on your life, I genuinely don't think most of those things like uh, you know, had 100% control over. Now, that being said, we have complete control over our surface area for opportunity. And so being present on social media and being hyper visible and helping people learn, like, I'm exposed to, over 10 million impressions a month now across social media of people that see my stuff. And so I'm absolutely optimizing for building cool new relationships and being exposed to opportunities and all that. But the trap is like our little monkey brains can't understand how big the internet is and how many people are on the other side of that. Like we're just from an evolutionary standpoint, like we're not capable of really comprehending that. And so this ROI calculation that we do is like it's super rudimentary and only based on the things that we can predict, when oftentimes the very best things are the things that you have no way of predicting.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a mix, I guess, if we're doing great things in life, we do have to intentionally make those happen. But there is this fate luck part of the things we bump into. Is that the case with you? I mean, because it's not accidental what you're doing now. You had to at some point become very intentional and focus on doing it in a very intentional way. But you also kind of bumped into some situations that allowed you to do it. What's the mix of that? Like intentionally doing it and then fate and luck kind of bringing some of it to you. What was the mix of that for you? What percentage, I guess, or however you say it?
Yeah, I mean, it started just consistently putting things on social media while I was still running the firm. So you get the questions of, wow, you got a great editor and this and that. And what camera do you use? And it's a total simplification of what is, a years long journey where like I was producing 2 videos a week for a year and a half while running a 40-person accounting firm. So the reality is I invested more time and money and attention into it than anyone else would think is reasonable. So for me, even when I was running the firm, which was a very like low leverage, just pretty meat and potatoes, straightforward business, I realized like there has to be this other layer to what I do that is leaning into serendipity more than just going into an office, meeting with the same people every single day. So I don't know what the right answer is there, but I will tell you most accountants are not investing anything in like what is going to enable luck and being visible and all of that for a lot of really unfortunate reasons. Like we just don't identify as quote unquote influencer, or we don't have anything to say. And so I don't know ultimately what the perfect answer is, but I would say not enough for most of us.
Okay. Yeah. Now it's wild the stuff you produce and do. There, it's a funny layer to it because it looks. I mean, this is why you know your stuff is good because you make it look easy, but it's not easy. So, can you give us a little peek behind the curtain? And I say this because we can see your stuff and go, cool, I'm going to do that next Tuesday.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
Yeah.
what you're doing now is this culmination of years of building, education, trying, stopping, breaking, successes. So I don't know. I'm not trying to discourage people from doing it. It's just things look different than they are behind the scenes. Not that anybody's hiding that, but give us a little peek about what is it like to, do the content production at the level that you do it at? What does that look like for you in a calendar, in a week?
Yeah, it's a production company. I've got basically 3 employees. Well, 4 now, I guess. We post. I mean, last week I think we posted 13 videos to social media, um, 30 to 40 social posts. I mean, people consume my stuff where they are on social, but the reality is it's going out a bunch of places. And man, that takes a team. Like that's work. Like that requires systems and all that. But to your point, the more effortless it looks, like the better it is for sure. So, behind the scenes, like, yeah, it's all I mean, it's a cinema camera, it's all professional grade stuff. The reason I shared the very first I always try to share the very first video I made with a fancy DSLR, and it was terrible. It was so bad because so much of it is, like, framing and lighting, and, like, you have to think like a cinematographer. Um, and so, yeah, there's editors. I do all the writing myself. Most of the edits still go through me for a final pass. But it is I don't try to I'm super transparent about what we do, but what it isn't is the place to start. Like, you know, people the beauty of online stuff, and Mr. Beast will say this, they shoot everything on these super cheap cameras because at the end of the day, it actually doesn't matter all that much. Like the more important thing is, can you connect with a human through video, which is a learned skill, like being able to be comfortable and vulnerable and all of that. And that's the more important thing than all the fancy stuff.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And that's stuff you are good at because it is weird to do a video alone in a room being animated at this camera staring at you. It's like there's nobody there. So but you do make it look so easy. So you have some specific skills, and I guess you're saying you've gotten better at that, right? That's a skill you practice and get better at on camera. Is that right?
Yes, I would say I think I'm as good as anybody at it in our profession because I've spent more time on it than anyone else in our profession. And that's the unfortunate truth is I've just invested more time in it than anybody else. And so there's definitely ways that you can lean into this. So for example, I built into my routine at the firm, uh, the habit of video. So if I have to send this thing out to my team every single week or every Tuesday, Thursday, and normally that's an email or that has to be a live meeting, is there a way that I could do that over video instead and send out like a Loom video to my team? So I was thinking about ways to manufacture into my routine a way to like develop that muscle. Um, but I honestly, the truth is, I think I've just done it more than anybody else, and so hopefully at that point it's better, right?
Yeah. Well,
Um,
that's what you hope for.
yeah.
It worked. It worked in your case. So that's good. What about your platforms? Where do you post? Which one is the most valuable for you to post on?
Oh, good question. I was a Twitter guy for a long time, and only really this year we started posting to the other platforms. So I've been very active on LinkedIn this year, especially the latter part of the year. And LinkedIn right now is still more than any other platform. There is more demand than supply. So there is a lot of opportunity for organic reach on LinkedIn still, particularly if you're speaking to a very specific type of person. But we're on Instagram as well. We're on TikTok. Um, we've got the second YouTube channel that is the daily podcast, and so we're just about everywhere that people hang out.
Mm, okay, very cool. When you're and we're going to switch here. I'm kind of getting the Jason Staats technology background from you right now.
Mhm.
When you're shooting a video, are you thinking this is for the U.S. market or the North American market, or I got to make this more global, or do you think in that way? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's a hard thing to balance. It's a hard thing to balance because there's a spectrum of usefulness where if it's so generic, it's not especially useful. If it's hyper specific, it's very useful, but to a much smaller audience. I focus on, for me, small firms, and that can be small firms anywhere internationally. So 100 employees and under, that's sort of the box that we put it in. We may make that smaller down the road. The reality is, by traditional social media standards, like that is a hyper niche. Like, my YouTube channel doesn't have more than 10,000 subscribers, but I've been able to build a killer business around this and, make more money than I would have thought you could ever do doing social media things with it being hyper niche. So, my background is obviously running a US firm, and I think that comes through. But the box we put around it right now is just small firms in general.
Okay, that makes sense. We're going to take a quick break for a promo, and then we'll be right back. I'm excited to share Divvy as an exclusive sponsor of the Thrivecast. Unlike expense management, spend management from Divvy now lets us provide cards to our team members, apply budgets to those cards with preset levels up front for each team member. And as we've implemented spend management, we no longer have to deal with the messy receipts on the back end of our expense management process. Check out getdivvy.com. That's GETDIVVY.com for more information on managing your funds and moving them to the front of your spend process. Okay, we're back. So, Jason, we got all the background, the stuff, but I love what you've built these skills, reach and influence, and I love what you're doing with it. You're actually helping us sort through the world, right? Because there's a lot to sort through in the form of technology. AI is kind of blowing all of our minds. So I think I don't know. It seems part of your purpose is to help us make sense of all that stuff.
Yeah.
At least that's what's coming through. Is that your goal? Are you doing that on purpose to help us understand it? So you're kind of summarizing the world, boiling it down and going, here's 3 points y'all need to absorb. Is that how you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a real beauty to like social media algorithms, I think, when ultimately everything I post has to be useful. And it can be easy to like stumble into things where you're like, I really think this is interesting, or maybe it's a little, it's centered on your ego or something about you. When it's like ultimately at the end of the day, stuff that will perform well as stuff that is useful. So at the end, I try to keep hyper focused on what do people need and what's really practical. What can they use today? Um, and obviously AI is front and center in the middle of that, and it's kind of amazing. Of all of the years to start investing in education content around technology, it would be this year when AI is really changing things. So totally, whether it's AI or not, it's the conversation is really just what do I think people need to hear right now. Sometimes that's cyclical and kind of the life cycle that your firm takes throughout the year. Sometimes it's a little bit current events, and right now it's a lot technology because it's just
Yeah.
so core to what we do.
Yeah. I love it. Well, I think there's one cool Twitter post back on May 15th. I'm pulling out the archives. That's like old now, right? May 15th. So I love it. And this is a pretty big, broad, big picture view of technology in the world. It says my 3 tips for how to be a responsible human being in the area of change, in the era of change. So obviously that's about technology. And so that's a pretty broad way to look at it. And I love the 3 points. The first one is specificity. Continue to be specific in what you do. So can you talk through these points with me? So do you mean be specific, be narrow, be niched, as opposed to being broad and trying to hit large markets? What do you mean by specificity?
Yeah, I think a lot of accountants are still hunting for that. What is the very specific person and the specific problem that they solve for? The the technology and the way productized services develop is they're always going after the general applications first. And ChatGPT is a great example of that. It's a generalist where it's simultaneously smarter than anybody while also not quite being as smart as subject matter experts. So ultimately, as those things improve and as productized solutions come up market, what's going to protect you from that? Just being a killer solution for a specific type of problem. That's something that we can always be trying to get more specific on.
Yeah. And you make a point in there too that the general stuff is being gobbled up. And I guess that's what technology does, right? It goes and eats up all of the general type, easy, automative type tasks, really in any industry. And so that's what technology has to go after, the easy solves, I guess.
Yep.
Is that what that means? And so you're saying go narrow because those are the harder places for technology to come in and take away from you. Is that right?
Yeah, and it's a little more human. It's what do these types of entrepreneurs struggle with? I mean, we got our kind of foundational technical expertise in tax and accounting or whatever it is. And that I think that used to be enough, but these days, and especially going forward, it has to be applied to a specific person, I think.
Okay. That's cool. I like that. So the tips on being a responsible human being in the era of change: specificity. Number 2 is engage. Resist the urge to be placated. Everybody wants to hear, we're good. And the accountants certainly are like, we're fine, y'all, right?
Yeah.
Aren't we? Like
Yeah.
the dumpster's on fire. So acknowledge that it's human nature to really kind of brush this off.
Yeah.
But it keeps you from growing is what you're saying. So engage, I think you mean lean into this. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So the most quoted thing I've ever said is AI won't replace accountants. Accountants using AI will replace accountants not using AI. And man, it is just the best security blanket to make you feel good. But the context of that original quote was I was saying, maxims like this make me feel great, but ultimately, I have no idea. We've got to take this stuff a day at a time. So yes, just be really aware. You know, the people who honestly, and I get asked to do a lot of speaking and stuff like that. And what everybody wants right now is somebody to get up on stage and say everything's going to be totally fine. And it probably will be. But like the reality is, ultimately it doesn't know, and it really doesn't matter because what's more important is like, okay, what do I do tomorrow? Like, what do I do today? Like, what is my framework? Should my framework change at all for how I develop and be useful a day at a time? Like, ultimately, that's all that matters to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'll be asking you some questions here to predict what AI will do to go completely against what you just said, taking
Yeah.
it a day at a time. But that's what we want. You've got to tell us, first of all, Jason, am I going to be okay? Should I change careers and become a doctor? So,
Yeah.
so that's my first question. And then will AI, will I get a chip implanted in my brain? So these are the things you'll help us learn. But I love what you're saying. Engaging is more about just going, hey, you can walk day to day through this too and learn as you go. That's actually what we do as humans. We're always learning as we
Yeah.
go. So
Yeah.
we underestimate, the creativity of humans to be able to navigate some of these hard things and figure it out as we go. It's not going to hurt us, I don't guess.
Yeah. And like ultimately, what is our place? And this is all so much bigger than us. So much bigger. Even the analogy of should I go become a doctor? Man, being a doctor is going to be completely different. Like that's changing really rapidly, right? So, um, less relevant than speculating and putting a bunch of energy into the whole crystal ball is just being curious and being open-minded and learning a little bit each day. We like to fixate on our own firms and how this disrupts our firms, but what is just as big a deal is how does this impact my clients? I mean, if all my clients got displaced tomorrow, it would be just as big a deal as if all of my work got displaced too. So ultimately, if we're going to be good advisors, we can't run and hide from this stuff.
Right. Well, that's the third point in this post. When we're talking about how do humans respond in eras of change. The third one was learn, and you made the points that you just made, which is, hey, your clients are dealing with this too. Why not learn about it and go help them?
Yep.
And you made the point. AI won't put AI experts out of work. So learn. What are the ways to learn? I mean, I think that's part of I don't know if it's part of your mission, but that's what you're doing with the platform and the influence. You're also then going, all right, I'm going to sort through the mess for you. So what are other ways to learn about AI? What are the basics people should be doing?
It's interesting because I think the way that people learn is definitely changing. My generation learns on YouTube and on social media. And obviously, in some ways, that's great. In some ways, that's awful. I think other generations learned by doing a couple conferences a year or getting their continuing education credit. Um, Ultimately, stuff is changing faster now to where I think you need a shorter feedback loop than doing a couple destination CPE trips per year. For me, that looks like YouTube, social media, podcasts. Like that is how I learn. I think people definitely learn different ways, but there's there's definitely a lot of generalist AI content out there. And yes, to your point, you noticed that, did you? How that does lead very nicely back to consuming my content. But I I see a tremendous amount of value in the people who are putting this all in layman's terms and sifting through what's most applicable to what we do. And honestly, I would love it if there were 100 more people who do what I do because it's a tremendous filter so that we can make it as easy as possible to keep people up to speed on the most relevant to them stuff that's happening.
Yeah, very cool. Well, what is our we're touching on a lot of this, but what is our profession's future, relationship with technology? I mean, is it going to be an awesome partner, or is it going to take some of our work away? And a lot of these questions are helping us understand, is this going to be good for me, or should I be fearful? So what is going I'm asking you to predict. This is great.
Yeah.
I love this. So
No,
tell
no.
us. And if you get this wrong, then no
Yeah.
more influence for you.
no, no
I
influence
just
for
I
you.
just I just said
Oh,
that, right? I have the
oh,
power
jeez.
to take
Yeah,
people's influence away.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So our
No,
profession's future with technology, yeah.
I think you ultimately only need to fear if you are unwilling to change. And I acknowledge that not everyone gets as excited about change. There's people who love it, people who don't like it. So absolutely the work will change. The helpful framing for me is, people always frame it as putting quote unquote accountants out of work. Ultimately, all of the tasks that we do are on a path to extinction, whether it's through automation, whether it's through being eliminated. Like eventually all that stuff will go away and we will be doing other stuff. Now, accountants right now do a pretty darn diverse set of tasks. So if you had an entire floor of people where all they were doing was this one very specific thing, yes, like those are the people who are most at risk. But man, that is the opposite of my experience working in public accounting, supporting people with all sorts of different stuff. Now, things will absolutely change and some of those tasks will go away. And I think we're accelerating the rate at which some of those tasks are being displaced. But ultimately, our job is to solve pains for entrepreneurs. I think we get fixated on like the normal service lines for accounting firms and all of that, but ultimately the reason people come and give us money is we are solving pains for them. On the other side of AI and it changing how we work and what entrepreneurship looks like and all of that, are entrepreneurs still going to have pains related to accounting and regulation? It sure seems like they will. So I suspect the work that we will be doing will be very different. But as long as people have pains, I think they're going to still come to us to say, like, man, can you take this off my plate? Can you help us with this?
Yeah. So so there's going to be a place for our profession, and it makes sense. Like my dad and my father-in-law were CPAs, and
Yeah.
so they have stories in the 70s and 80s filling out tax returns with pencils, right, and erasing
Yeah.
erasing stuff, and
Yeah.
so here we are. I'm a CPA. You're a CPA. We actually have valuable things still to offer, but we certainly don't do any of that. And so when the computer came out, I'm sure everybody was like, "Oh my God, they're going to take away
Yeah.
my eraser now.
Yeah.
I'll lose my job because I can't erase things." And that's not at all. So even now, looking 15, 20 years out in the future, probably this will all be a major aid to us to help our clients even more, I imagine. But you just said it. You're going to change. So what you're doing now, you're not going to do. And maybe that truth, if that's a truth, is scary to people. Like some of your things are going away.
Yeah.
You think that's true? There's things going away.
For sure. Yeah. And that is scary. I would say it's most scary because it's unknown. Going back to like that ROI calculation and the struggle to like trust serendipity and what could happen. It's really easy. Like we've got 20/20 vision for the stuff that we do today and what's in front of us. But like over that next unknown, we don't know what's there. So like you go through that door and you're like closing the door behind you on all these other things and that feels scary and that's a hard thing to do. But man, on the other side of that door, there's probably a whole bunch more doors that you just haven't explored yet, and we don't know, we don't understand. And that is like reality is that is scary. Um, but ultimately, it sure seems like there's still going to be a place for us.
Yeah. Well, closing those doors can be scary to some people. Imagine to somebody like you, that's exciting. It's like, well, I've already closed doors before and I've seen so many opportunities because I closed the door. That kind of stuff feels exciting to me. It's like, what else have I not learned that I'm about to go get to learn? How do you view it? Is it exciting to you, the future, or are there particular fears in the future?
It's both. It's a lot of both. It's I feel really grateful that I can really have my head in the weeds day to day, and I mean, just about all I do is research and talk to software companies about what they're doing, and consider like in a real practical way how does this apply to the stuff that our profession does. And yeah, there's it goes kind of day to day as you feel different day to day, but what's if anything scares me, it's the rate at which it's changing and how it's actually really fast to change direction in a way that will keep up with this. Now there's a lot of AI is so many things. is way bigger than what we do, and absolutely going to create a lot of uncomfortable social things. And the next election cycle is just going to be a disaster, I think, with how easy it is to produce information and impersonate people and all that. And that's going to be a really big social change that's going to be a struggle to navigate. I shared online the other day, I created an AI generated avatar of me presenting my podcast, and my wife could not tell the difference between that and the real version of me.
I mean, that's kind of scary. That kind of stuff is freaky.
Yeah, it's weird. So there's a lot of that where, I mean, we still haven't figured out effective ways to regulate social media. Like there are definitely issues with how fast this stuff is happening, and like what is the responsible way to regulate it. There's a bill now that they're kicking around basically deep fakes and how you regulate that. And all that's going to be hard. I try to focus on, because all those things ultimately I don't have a meaningful degree of control over, and that stuff's going to happen. I try to focus on how can I use this stuff to help people in a more compelling way, and how do I just focus on the business aspects of how this supports me and my team and the clients that I serve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. So I guess artificial intelligence, that's been around, a long time, much longer than probably people realize. But was it OpenAI, I guess last fall, right, of 2022 that really started to that it started this fast trend of adoption of generative AI? Is that when it really came in and started blowing things up, when OpenAI with ChatGPT unlocked all this?
Yeah, it did a couple things. It was kind of AI's, iPhone moment, some have called it, at just the unbelievable rate at which people picked up ChatGPT and started using it. That being said, we are still so far really from mainstream adoption. I think what will probably kick things off in another really big way is when these things are built into the assistants that we have on our smartphones. The ability to talk with these things live, because it is so much better than your Siri or your Google Assistant now. So on the consumer side, yes, it just like poured gasoline on that, and there was a business to be made there on the consumer side for the first time. And now you have companies like, Inflection's gotten $1.3 billion in funding for a personal assistant AI. Like just astronomical amounts of money are being poured into products. On the developer side, even OpenAI has said this is way, way better than we ever thought it would be. Like that, it's kind of like a brute force approach to some version of intelligence. And so even they didn't think it would be this good. And it has kind of reimagined how you build software. And we've got kind of this new age where it's like you have all the folks who are successful in the SaaS paradigm, kind of the incumbent software companies. And then you've got a new age of companies that are AI first, where ultimately and it's kind of like transition to cloud. You had desktop companies, and those desktop companies were not great at building SaaS products, right? And it's the same kind of thing where you've got now a new generation of AI first products. You've got some SaaS products leaning into AI. And it will be interesting to see ultimately what the most compelling version is. There's a lot of really smart people that say, the user interface by and large is going away as we move to conversational software. That UI was almost just a speed bump until it could just comprehend everything that you say, right?
That's a trip, because the UI was so huge. When the cloud came about, just making that UI work and navigate humans through it was such a huge part of the focus of technology companies. And to hear it may not matter as much is just crazy.
It's pretty wild, and we'll see. And it's probably going to be application specific, but I don't know how to change my Windows settings to dark mode right now. Like I could type it in and hack through the settings and go through, and the menus probably changed from the last time I did, and that's just super frustrating. But you know what I can do is hit, like, I think it's Windows key H, and say turn on dark mode, and it'll do it. And that's a situation where you're probably never going to fumble through the settings again, right?
Right. So then you don't need a navigation for settings, right? That becomes
Yeah.
redundant. It doesn't need to be put on the UI at all. So, which is a totally, I guess, for technology people, I don't know. That's just a completely different way to build software. It's like, no, you tell something to do something and it does it. You don't click things, which that's bonkers to even think about that.
Mm-hmm.
That the mouse at some point, right, was just mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean, in the next 12 months, we're probably going to have a unicorn company who is just a plugin for ChatGPT. That's it. There is no UI.
I don't even get it. I need a freaking screen, right? I need a
Yeah.
screen to look at, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's crazy.
But how many times have you had this experience of like shouting at your computer monitor and being like, I just want you to do this?
Right. And now it will.
Right?
Or it'll say, "Hey, I know you're upset, Jason, and it's okay. Let me turn that on dark mode for you."
Let me put some jazz music on. Yeah. Or it'll do it wrong. It'll do it wrong in this spectacular way you could have never predicted.
Right. Yeah. Well, and there is something about AI where there's prompting, right? There's engineer prompting, and that's mind blowing. Do what I typed in here, but there.
Yeah.
I don't know what level of AI, if we're there yet, where it can take a prompt and then apply something based upon that first prompt and give you a more specific, which becomes more conversational. And what is that called? Or are we headed in that direction where it's not just the first prompt, but it's multiple ones and it's learning from the first 2 or 3 prompts and getting better at the conversation? What is that?
Yeah, so models have what are called context limits, and that is basically how much can they remember. And so right now, ChatGPT can remember about 5 pages worth of information at a time. You have other models like Claude that can remember about 150 pages, but ultimately, in certain situations, you want it to remember forever. And you have some solutions now that pair a language model with like a database of all of the things you've ever talked about, because if we think about where things are headed, and this is like almost a now thing, like this is not sci-fi really. Uh, if you have this personal assistant that can see into your email and all these things, and it helps you with these things day to day, and you spend the next 3 years telling that person that AI how you work and your preferred way to do X, Y, Z, and this is not different to developing a staff person, but this assistant remembers everything. It will call you out on your contradictions because we have a lot of those. But 3 years from now, what level of importance are you going to assign to that artificial intelligence? Imagine if, poof, somebody had the rights to delete that artificial intelligence. You would be pissed, right? And so that would be so bad. But as soon as these things have long-term memory, our relationship with AI, it gets really complex. I've produced about 120 30-minute long podcasts now that is me talking about my thoughts on the accounting profession. And all of that can get trained into an AI that somebody can have a conversation with tomorrow. And that is a shockingly good snapshot of me, of everything I think about how to run an accounting firm. Uh, and so, what if we had something like this we can put in front of our clients? We could license access to. Like, a lot of stuff's about to change.
Okay, now you're scaring me. I pee-peed in my pants a little bit. Thank you.
Oh, God.
Well, and nobody knows right now, but I'm actually on a podcast with not the real Jason Staats.
Yeah.
It's right. You're just an AI. Maybe you are. I don't know. Are you real? But can I believe you if you say you're real or not? I don't know.
So, what's amazing is, do you ever see those? It was real hot a couple years ago. These apps that would animate like pictures of your ancestors. And it would be like, oh, it's this old black and white photo of my great great grandpa, and he can talk and say things. And that was this really cool novelty. So that was the last generation of people for whom we won't be able to make a true to life avatar that you can communicate with long after that person's dead. So my children will be able to talk to a 35-year-old version of me, a 60-year-old version of me, an 80-year-old version of me. Like, it's pretty much there. If my wife can't tell the difference right now, I think we're there. Uh, and that's weird. And so how does that change advisory, right? Like, how does that change uh, building a relationship with an AI? Because that seems pretty darn weird, right?
That seems weird. But and like you said, it's not sci-fi for you to send your avatar or your AI, whatever you call it, to a podcast. Like you have a podcast, appointment, and you say, "Can I send my avatar person?" And some podcasts may go, "That's fine. Yeah, let's, this technology's strong enough for you to go ahead and do that." That's crazy.
It's super crazy. And so when everybody has access to these tools, does it actually change how we consume? Like, did that just devalue conversations like this? If you can simulate them, right? And we're already seeing that with like simulated Joe Rogan podcasts where he talks with someone that he didn't actually talk to. And
That's great. I don't know. Yeah, we're going to have to navigate our way there. Some people will love it, right? And I would love it. I'd want to try to stump your avatar and just ask it something bonkers about a flu shot or something. And then it go, oh, it start like freaking out. And I don't know. But that's not crazy. That's not sci-fi, which is kind of what you're saying. And we would have thought that maybe a year ago, but now we know it's not sci-fi. And we're only a year into this, and it's moving so fast. So I just want to bring up that's what you said that's a little bit fearful is the pace is going to make it difficult to really manage change management appropriately and client care and all the things we do love and care about as accounting professionals. The pace is going to make this difficult, isn't it?
I think we probably have to invest more in education than we have before on a tighter feedback loop. We have to be open. And all of this is super overwhelming. I mean, it gets even more dystopian than that. But ultimately, my framework is I need to be useful a day at a time. Like we got to take this a day at a time. I need to keep investing in myself. And if you can, like try to find a way to have fun like in the process. And it's a really amazing time in history right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's cool. And I do love that, our technology software partners are really becoming more of our partners because they all must implement AI into their product, right? Because they're all doing it. So you kind of have to do it now. And so they're spending a lot of development time getting that right. That is going to help us. Their product has to adopt AI well. Some suck at it, some are doing better, and it's so great. It's so good. That is truly going to help our profession in amazing ways. So our technology partners are becoming even more. They're building things we actually can't do, right? We can't go into their software and implement this generative AI, and they are having to do it for us, and that's amazing. That's truly helpful.
Our tech partners are truly the gatekeepers to our future relevance. Like they absolutely are.
Okay, say that again. You remember what you just said?
Yes, I said they're absolutely the gatekeepers to our future relevance. If we don't have tools to do this, then like we're hosed, right? Like we're so reliant on them. And that's why I really try to highlight the people doing meaningful AI things. I try to get out there about, hey, how can we use AI to help this thing? And there's a bunch of examples of people then building it into their products. Like as users, we need to be vocal about, man, how do we keep applying AI to our domain in really useful ways?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and it's cool. I like what you said that those technology partners are what's going to enable us to be relevant, to continue to remain relevant, which means we have to adopt technology, obviously. And most of this profession does that. I know there's some still old school firms. Those are all going away pretty quickly, in the next 10, 15 years or sooner. I don't know. But most everybody that's not got their head in the sand is adopting, AI. So it's good. Yeah. All right. One more question. and you got to refute what Barry Melanson said, the CEO of the AICPA. Wow, I'm asking you to go on record.
Yeah, I have to refute him. Okay. Buckle up.
Well, no, you don't have to.
Incoming hot take.
That's right. Let's see if you do. So he did say, no matter what you've heard, ChatGPT didn't really take the CPA exam. It may have taken a practice test, but it didn't take a current test under the same circumstances that a human test taker takes the test. So what of that is right, makes sense, or relevant? Because when it took the CPA exam or, filed a tax return correctly, we all pooped our shorts, and it's like completely freaky. Yeah. How do you respond to his quote?
Yeah, I mean, he's saying that it didn't go in a live environment and take the actual questions, and it didn't. And you'd have to, I don't know how you'd do that, get Prometric to let you in or something like that. And so there's some the variable there is, did it ultimately take questions from a test bank that were like trained into the model or something like that, right? I think when you have a model that is the size of a GPT, it's not retrieving verbatim explicit answers. Like that's not how these language models work. It is true that it didn't, and they're like, nobody has actually gone into an actual live test and done this. Me personally, I think it's absolutely capable of passing a test if it can pass a bunch of test banks, honestly, in flying colors. Like, I think it scored at 86 or something like that. I don't have any doubts. I think the bigger question is, like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't. Because if it can't today, there's not going to be long until it will, right? So I don't know that it ultimately matters if it can pass the CPA exam or not. It's like, I don't know. I mean, it almost feels like a calculator where we're in like this transitionary period where we're like, well, what's my value if I don't have to add anymore? To me, it's a killer tool for accountants because we build our firms around assurance and ensuring that the output is correct. And that's the main issue with AI right now, right? Is not being able to blindly trust the output. And I think that's why we're actually uniquely suited to use it, as we already have those frameworks in place.
I love it. Okay. No, I love how you reframe that, which is that those kind of little tricks online, right? It fills out a tax return accurately. That kind of stuff freaks us out. And you're like, does that matter?
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, to the AI CPA's credit, I think people kind of pounced on that quote, and it's now been circulated a bunch. This week, actually, they're releasing an AI toolkit for firms that I help them develop. Their next round of their tech startup incubator is exclusively AI companies. Like, they are investing in AI stuff for the profession. And even I've even heard Barry say, like, ultimately, does it matter? Like, probably not. It's a tool that we need to figure out how to incorporate. And I think that's probably the more meaningful discussion there.
Yeah, I love it. Okay. All right, we're done. Jason, thank you for joining us on the Thrivecast. Where do people go find you? YouTube, just your daily Jason show?
Pretty much everywhere. I'm really sorry about it that I'm pretty much at any feed. You can search my name, you'll find me.
Right. Yeah. Isn't that funny? That's the ending podcast question. So how do people find you online? What's your URL? It's like, bruh, I don't know what to tell you.
Everybody's like, man, I've already seen too much of him. Thanks. But
it's like, I can find him. I can locate him. So
if I send you to one thing, it'd be the podcast called Jason Daily. And to me, this is so hard to navigate every single day. Like, that's where we're having the everyday kind of conversations. Like, yikes, there was just this new release from OpenAI. What does it mean? Like, that's where we're kind of unpacking that stuff each day.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, thank you for joining us on the show. And I hope I get to see you in person again. One day, I got to meet you one time at AICPA.
I know.
You're like 6'7". People don't realize this in person.
I'm huge. I am
huge. Yeah. Like, oh my God. You're like this giant. No, that was a podcast joke. So, yeah. All right. Thanks so much, Jason, for joining us. I appreciate you being on the show, man.
Thank you.